to start the day with, I'll start the day with presenting the moderator of the first session, Ms. Rodeina Challand, the Vice President Scientific Affairs at BioFactura. Rodeina has over 30 years of experience in healthcare, cancer research, and pharmaceutical industry. She's experienced in all aspects of biosimilar development, from clinical, regulatory strategies, study design, execution, and commercialization. And we are very lucky to have Rodeina over because Rodeina has been at the start of the biosimilars development. So over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you for a great welcome. Welcome to all our delegates that are online, those who are here in person. It's our first conference in 2 years, so I'm a bit nervous. Go easy on me. So given that we have a very, very tight schedule and amazing presentations, amazing speakers, so to give them all the opportunity. So I'm going to kind of speed through the introduction of these the individual speakers instead of because they're all extremely experienced. So to kick off the conference, we have Anil. Okay, he's a general manager from Adalvo, Chief Commercial Officer. He certainly has a lot of years of experience in the business side, and I look very much forward to welcoming Anil and hand over to Anil for his presentation. Anil?
Thanks, Rodeina. Hello, everyone. Good morning to Amsterdam. I'm very pleased to be actually the 5th time in PharmaSynergy. Great event. I always enjoy collaborating with Christina and Jane, and looking forward to today's chapter. It's actually today I choose a topic, so-called pure play biosimilar strategy. Industry talks about it. Probably you have come across with this statements a lot from the many biosimilar players. They talk about pure play. But at least personally, I had not been seeing much clarity about what is pure play means for those companies. And probably every company have their own definition when it comes to pure play. Well, I wanted to reflect this from Alvotech perspective. As Rodeina introduced, I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Alvotech. Had been build up Alvotech's commercial go-to-market strategy from scratch. Today we have 15 global partners in place, namely in Teva in the US, Stada in Europe, Fuji in Japan, Jump in Canada. And also I had been founded Adalvo, which is a B2B business of Alvogen. That's a significantly growing business. So if we go to next slide. You basically have seen that we have come a long way in the biosimilar industry over the past decade. As Rodeina has been in the business last 30 years, I'm sure she will confirm all the evolution of the industry, especially from regulatory perspective. There is a greater clarity across global markets. Of course, European regulatory perspectives were much more clearer. US has catch up very well in the last 3 years. And in fact, we have even seen the first interchangeable biosimilar approval in the US with Biocon's insulin product. All these developments, of course, showing that there is much more regulatory clarity when it comes to biosimilar registration in the global markets. And then secondly, expansion of care driven by access to more affordable alternatives to reference biologics is a big topic. I'm pretty sure you have seen the data points mainly from Europe. After biosimilars entered to the market, the sales for the biosimilar were growing 10 to 15% every year, mainly because the physicians and healthcare practitioners are switching the treatments from the small molecules to highly effective biosimilars and biologics when they become more affordable, which is actually great also for the society. On top of that, we have seen increasing number of biosimilar approvals and launches in global markets. As you can see the data here, we are already seeing almost over $30 billion biosimilar market today, which was almost not existing 10 years ago, and going up to $80 billion in the next 5 years. And as you also know, half of the global pharma market is today biologics, and the shift continues to happen towards the biologics. 60–70% of the big pharma pipelines are biologics. So it's a space to be, it's a space to remain in the next decade. There has been a shift in the competitive set, including numerous market exits. You have seen that Momenta has been exiting the space. You have seen that Merck was exiting the space, Allergan, Epirus, Baxalta, and then lately Boehringer Ingelheim has been exiting the space as well. And also we have seen that even Pfizer has publicly announced that they are going to remain opportunistic in the biosimilar space. Of course, we can debate the reasons of that, but it's showing that there are lots of dynamism going on in this market. There have been additionally numerous merger and partnerships going on. Viatris was very successful with their Biocon partnership, and we hear that there is a merger discussions going on. We have seen Samsung Bioepis basically bought back their shares from Biogen, which is a very nice and bold move for Samsung, and looks like Samsung is going to be a direct to business type of company moving forward, which is showing their commitment into biosimilars. And lastly, we have shifted from the early and less complex cytokines like filgrastim or EPO to more complex monoclonal antibodies. Today, we are in a place where the approved biosimilars to the foundational cancer therapies of trastuzumab, rituximab, bevacizumab are showing significant market penetration. Namely, in the US today, these products that I mentioned having 60–65% biosimilar penetration, which was literally 0 2.5 years ago. And we are on top of the cusp of the highest revenue drug in the world facing biosimilar competition in all major markets, namely adalimumab. The growth of biosimilars is expected to continue, driven by additional patent expires and continue to push to improve access to these more cost-competitive treatment options. This was just a landscape to show you what has been, in a nutshell, happening last 10 years in the global biosimilars market. If we go to next slide, in order to be competitive through the next wave of biosimilars, a clear strategy will be very important. So you have seen that the market is shifting and lots of dynamic things are happening almost every quarter. A strong cohort of biosimilar companies has emerged, and developing a clear strategy is important to remain competitive in this space. Alvotech has been purposefully in its strategy to be a pure play biosimilar developer and manufacturer. And this is exactly the big question. I hope the companies can also be very clear about when they say pure play. For us, the pure play biosimilar definition has actually 4 meanings. The first one and the foremost, fully focused on biosimilars. I'm not sure how many companies can claim that today. We see many companies are having hybrid operations, either innovative business like Amgen, and then they have a very strong biosimilar business growing. But let's see how long. Then we talked about generic companies entering to the space, having a generic portfolio and a biosimilar portfolio, typically through the partnerships. Can they claim they have the pure play biosimilar focus? Can they achieve that? For us, it is very clear that you have to have a dedication to biosimilars. You have to focus on biosimilars. That's critically important to be successful in that space. Secondly, we believe biosimilars is a platform game. So the companies who don't own the platform will not be sustainable in that space in the long term. What we mean with this, the companies don't own the technology, manufacturing, development, analytical capabilities, cell line development capabilities, fill and finish capabilities. The companies, they don't own the value chain, cannot remain in this space because biologics are complex to manufacture, complex to develop, and the companies using CDMO networks, the companies using third-party networks unfortunately will not remain sustainable in that space, because the space will be more and more competitive and more products coming to the space. So controlling the platform will be key. That's the second pillar for us. When you talk about pure play, we have to talk about also if you have a biosimilar platform or not. The third point is that we have seen many companies having portfolio approaches that are kind of one-on-one copies of the brands, so to say. And if you have a pure play biosimilar strategy, we believe it's going to be critical to differentiate in the portfolio space. Believe it or not, you can still differentiate in the biosimilars. And I will talk about it a little bit later in my presentation. Last but not least, it is also important to control the commercialization of the products to an extent. And it has to be a global commercialization. We believe the company is focusing on Europe only, or focusing on US only, or focusing on China only, will not remain competitive in the biosimilar space. We believe the biosimilars should be a global play. That's going to be a key part of the pure play biosimilar strategy. So, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, every company can have their own definition of what is pure play. But I wanted to make it, at least from Alvotech perspective, very clear how we see pure play biosimilar definition from our perspective. If we go to next slide, and this is actually a space which not many companies publicly talking about, and this is what I wanted to bring into this valuable event to show how we look into our portfolio differentiation. Of course, there are basic terms here, the launch timing, the competitive landscape, partners, feedback, and so on. But there is a keyword in our portfolio selection process, and this is a slide not made for PharmaSynergy. This is a slide which is used in Alvotech SEC filings. So this is an official Alvotech position, differentiation. We put differentiation as a key word and a key point in our portfolio selection process. Just to name some of the differentiation points, Alvotech was the first company, and still today the only company, who has filed an interchangeable high concentration adalimumab biosimilar in the US market. We are the first and still the only one. That has been a clear differentiation. And I'm sure you guys know what interchangeability means, but just for the broader audience to repeat, interchangeability means that your product can be automatically substitutable at the specialty pharmacy level without interaction with the healthcare profession. That means uptake of biosimilars who has interchangeable designation will be much more faster than the products they don't have. And as of today, we have only seen 2 companies made such a commitment to develop interchangeable biosimilars in the US market, which is very interesting to see. There has been a designation available last 3 years. It changed a couple of times, but still many big companies have not been taking this challenge and commitment to make it. Very interesting thing to observe. So people talk about pure play biosimilar, but they don't talk about their portfolio differentiation, and that's a very important point to make. Secondly, biologics in most of the time, I guess all the time, comes with an injectable formulation until someone makes the oral tablet of biologics. I know some companies are trying. Meaning that when you have an injection to the patient, there is a certain pain happening, or the patient is using an auto-injector, which has also different emotional content to it. So the point here is that, can we increase the patient compliance by using better drug delivery systems, better auto-injector platforms? These are the really questions that we continuously ask to ourselves within Alvotech. I believe biosimilars industry to continuously should ask this as well, because the conventional vial and PFS solutions are becoming very generic, so to say, in that market. So we need to go beyond that. If you go to next slide, and that's a very prime example of portfolio differentiation from our perspective, and it's clear for pure play companies to really think about it. Alvotech has been the first filer in the US market for the high concentration of adalimumab, which is a $17 billion market, and we had been the first one filing high concentration. Secondly, we have a citrate-free formulation, meaning less pain on injection. We have a super attractive drug delivery platform coming with an auto-injector that is developed with key opinion leaders and 35 patients together. We developed this together with the patients and with the key opinion leaders. We believe that the device is even better than the Humira's original device. And the last but not least, we have got successful results of our interchangeability study and have already filed into FDA back in December. That's a prime example of portfolio differentiation, and we believe pure-play biosimilar companies should seriously look into these differentiations. If we go to next slide, not only platform and individual product targets, but we believe portfolio play is also important. So I mentioned about some big pharma companies exiting the space. Also, we have seen that there has been, I would say, 20 plus one product biosimilar companies that are not existing anymore or will not be existing anymore because they don't have the portfolio. And biosimilars will be a portfolio play because this is what the payers will ask. This is what the hospitals will ask. This is what the value chain will ask in the future. Therefore, the portfolio play is critical. It also helps to be strategic, not only about individual product selection, but when thinking about the portfolio more broadly. You can see an illustrative example here of what a portfolio might look like, comprised of individual products, all targeting different therapeutic areas, versus one where there are multiple products in the same therapeutic area. By nature of having some assets in the same therapeutic area, you can benefit from synergies that come from building relationships with the same sets of stakeholders, such as sales force, medical representative synergies, building expertise internally and educational materials. So additionally, you can provide multiple options a patient might be prescribed when trying to find the route of therapy that's most effective for that patient. Lastly, by coming with a portfolio of products, it comes conversations with stakeholders more valuable and potentially simpler, namely payers. So it's a really critical way, strategically how I see it, the companies coming with 1-2 product portfolios, unfortunately, will not be sustainable in that space. Either they will exit or they need to merge or they need to give their products to the bigger companies to survive in that space. And at the end, as of even today, we see very little dossier houses where you can get your products. I mean, if you look into the well-recognized names like Celltrion, which is now officially going direct in the business. So Celltrion will not be a dossier house that you can go and get your license. Samsung, amazing story, amazing company, but we also clearly see that they are going B2C both in the US and in Europe. So you can't knock their door and get a license either. And who else left? There are a handful of respected companies, but there are not dozens of companies where you can get your dossiers. And how can you grow without having biosimilars? I mentioned to you that half of the global pipelines are biologics. So you have to have access to a platform. You have to access to a portfolio. So I think every company should really ask to themselves if they have a biosimilar or a biologic strategy. If the companies, they don't have it, they should urgently find a way to be in the space. And if they want to be in the space, it has to be a pure play biosimilar strategy. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. And last but not least, if we look into next slide, from Alvotech perspective, we have already filed our first asset and got it approved in Europe and Canada and in the US. First high concentration interchangeable adalimumab biosimilar, as I mentioned. Our second asset is also going to be filed this year, literally in 4 months, both in Europe, Canada, Japan, and in the US. So we have global file for AVT04 Stelara biosimilar, which is a $10 billion product, and we are going to be among the first filers. And then we have recently added omalizumab in our portfolio, which is a respiratory program. It's a clinical stage asset as well. We started the phase 3 already. We will be filing next year. That's another advanced program in our portfolio. What is also very interesting, remember my speech around the portfolio play. It's going to be critical to have diversified portfolio. If you just have oncology, good luck with that. It's going to be very tough. If you have immunology, good luck with that as well. So it's really important to diversify across the portfolio. So in our portfolio, we are very proud. We have products from oncology to immunology, respiratory to ophthalmology. And this is a really well thought, broad and diversified portfolio, which pure play biosimilar companies should really think of. With this, I'm basically ending here. If we go to next slides, I am more than happy to welcome any questions you might have. Thank you.
Welcome, Gopal, who is from Lupin, and he is also going to talk to us about bidding on the cost competitiveness of biosimilar capabilities. Gopal has been working in Lupin for several years, and he's in the biotech division, and it's among the top 10 largest generic company by market capitalization and the 8th largest generic pharmaceutical company by revenue globally. Without saying much more, Gopal, please go ahead with your presentation and welcome on board.
Thank you, Rodeina, and thanks Anil and Jane and Christina for giving this opportunity to have a conversation about the biosimilar industry and the details about this particular session of PharmaSynergy. I think the main topic that I'm going to be talking about today is a very good segue into what Anil has just presented, because this is really the next stage of the conversation that we have. Once you have the portfolio, once you have the platform, what next? The way the biosimilar business is currently going. Is it moving towards another generic business in terms of cost and in terms of the market potential? Or is there a way where it's going to balance out in between? And that's precisely what I'm going to cover in my presentation today, and where the market is heading, a little bit of that, and then what are the different ways that companies can do to try and stay in the business for a longer time. And I can't agree more than what Anil has covered, that going forward, it is going to be a pure play biosimilar game. As you have to have a portfolio, you have to have a platform, and these are the ones which are going to drive the business for biosimilars. Just to further emphasize the point, the market share in the US has been just great in terms of the biosimilar pickup. As we know, they are a little slow in terms of the European market, but definitely you can see that the IMS data clearly shows that there's a lot of potential for the biosimilars. And as you see, these are some of the launched molecules, and you can see how the market share erosion in biologics is happening because of the biosimilar entrant. And also individually, if you look at all the molecules, and this is data from the IMS IQVIA as of calendar year 2021, and you will see that the biosimilar and the biologics are almost meeting in between, and this is where the market share is going towards. And even if you look at the price, they're all in the mid-range of 65 to 57%, and the gap between the innovator price and the biosimilars are not really large. So it's a clear indication that it is moving towards a pure cost game in the long run. Where is the midpoint? That is something that we as an industry needs to establish in the next few years. But it is clear signs that there has to be a lot of things put in place that will ensure that you're competitive in the long run if you are going to be a pure play biosimilar player in the market. Again, another interesting in Europe, of course, the game is completely different. It is all about cost at this point. If you see the number of players that are there in the market, 17 molecules approved, but 69 products, and this is each country has their own rules that will enable biosimilar interchangeability, biosimilar uptake, and they're very, very aggressive. The government see that there is a huge benefit, and in a way it's good for the industry overall in terms of pharma, because this is what we have seen in generics as well. Drives innovation. When you have a generic entering or a biosimilar entering, it will ensure that we have better therapies in the long run. So overall, good for the patients, good for companies that are in the pharma business. But in terms of specifically about the biosimilar market, it's very important that a price sensitive industry is what is going to be evolving in the future. And how, as a company, you might have one product, two product, or like all the pure play biosimilars, you might have 6 to 8 or 10 biosimilars in your pipeline. But is your business case the same it's looking at this point from 5 years from now? And how are you prepared for taking your products into the market? Some of the tailwinds that we have, acceptance of biosimilars now largely a given. New biosimilars are penetrating faster than the older ones. This is clearly seen in the US as well as in Europe. Prices are holding up, especially in the US. And this is, a good sign, especially in the US. This is going to give you sustained revenues over many years. But again, how many companies are really targeting the US market? Today, it could be just 5 or 6. In the long run, hopefully there are more companies targeting the US market for the biosimilars. For example, filgrastim today, after 7.5 years, is at $100 for the 300 mcg PFS. And $100 is still a very good number for a product that has a biosimilar for 7.5 years. So this kind of gives you the incentive, but again, in Europe, the same price is somewhere around $20, $25 or even less in some countries like UK and Italy. And who are really going to participate in those markets if you've had a really high cost of development, as well as the yields are still in the 5-year prior range. Again, another big benefit, the governments and regulators are really pushing hard, as I already mentioned. There are a lot of biosimilar actions, a lot of biosimilar moves that are coming into play, and I'll cover a little bit of that later on. And of course, the payers are the ones who are really benefited out of this, and it gives them an incentive to go to the biosimilars as soon as possible, because their cost of therapy and the cost of spend is definitely driving down, which they can then use for other treatment requirements and better quality of life. And of course, one of the key aspects, and that I can't emphasize more, is having a global dossier development strategy that will help us to understand and harmonize one dossier for all markets. And if you are a pure play biosimilar player, if you're somebody who wants to be in the biosimilar in the long run, gone are the days where you can develop a molecule for, say, the US, or say a regulated emerging market, or a market which is specific like China or Japan, and then go through the entire development again to then move into a regulated market development strategy. And reinventing the wheel, you just end up spending more time on the overall development. Some of the headwinds, again, is it really worth developing a biosimilar if you're not in the first wave of biosimilar launch as soon as the patent the LOE expires? That's a big question, and we see there's a huge gap between companies that are entering in the second wave and companies that are entering in the first wave between biosimilar entries into the market. Manufacturing capacity investments are large, and you need to take a risk even before your product probably enters into phase 3 trials. And how many companies are really willing to take those risks without having a product approved or getting approved in the market? Again, the chances of a biosimilar failing in clinic is much, much lower. But again, it's again a question of how many companies are willing to invest in the long run, right from the beginning. And of course, in the US, litigation is costly and patent dance procedure could be long drawn. We've seen again and again examples of this very clearly, and a lot of the molecules are still, not launched in the US because of the whole patent scenario over there. But these are points that really drive our overall biosimilar development. And I've been thinking about the easiest way to put this across. And anybody who is looking to enter or looking to be a significant player in the biosimilar development, the three aspects that you really need to have, and I couldn't simplify it further than this, is the 3 C's of biosimilar development, is the cost. You have to commit to the cost of development. You have to commit to the capacity. And of course, you have to be committed to the development for overall which markets, which targeted therapies, which kind of molecules are you going to develop? Is there a platform approach, or is it just a single play that you look at cashing in on the advantage because you have a dossier in licensed or a clone in licensed? So these are certain things that you really have to commit to, but in terms of the biosimilar overall development. And finally, just some quick ways, and I spend a lot of time on this slide because this is the crux of my presentation. But how do you mitigate and how do you bring down the cost or cost of goods in the long run? You look at operationally, looking at increased batch sizes, minimizing the product loss, go for the highest batch sizes that are possible at any given point in time for your particular product. That is the key, because especially if you're manufacturing in countries like in Asia or outside of Europe, you need to have the product retested again in Europe and released into the market. And a lot of other countries are also going that way. And having a smaller batch size is really going to affect you, because you're going to spend more in terms of logistics and in terms of retesting and packaging for these additional batches. How do you look at optimized supply chain and logistics? If you have a portfolio approach, you can get into long-term contracts with supply chain people. You can get into long-term contracts with logistic vendors. And this is really going to help you. These are small costs, but trust me, these are the costs that will really help you to compete in a tender market in Europe or a tender market in somewhere in Middle East, which could be the differential of $1 or $2, which will enable you to penetrate the market much more. And some of these tenders are, lock in for 2 years, 3 years, and you win the tender at a given point in time, and you're committed for that business for a long period of time. So these are certain key aspects that you need to keep in mind once you are closer to commercialization. Of course, formulation change, as Anil already covered this, room temperature stable formulations, helping you in better logistics, or even IV to SC. Is there a way that you can, enable these kind of formulation changes that will give you better access to the markets? And well, would it command a better COGS? That is, of course, left into each market, but it is definitely beneficial in terms of all the other operational things that needs to be done when it comes to these kind of formulations. And then, of course, having a very optimized CMC and characterization strategy. Which markets do you source the RMPs from? Companies now, regulators now ask for minimum of 10 batches from each market, especially in the US and Europe. So how do you ensure that you're sourcing that right from the beginning and ensuring that you have that many batches for your characterization CMC strategy in place and planning for it right at the beginning, tying up with local vendors to ensure you source those products, and also ensuring you get a good price is all going to help you in your overall cost of development, as well as even in your COGS when it comes to the other aspects here. Of course, but the key is in terms of the manufacturing. These are really the game changers when you have to sustain in the long term when it comes to the COGS. Some of the biologics have gone through more than 35 changes in their process. And this is continuously another improvement that needs to be done, and there has to be a group of people. Once the product development that I would like to make is product development does not end after your approval. It has to continue. You have to continue to find ways to bring down your COGS in the long run, because this is where the real game changer is in terms of the manufacturing and your COGS. Continuous manufacturing, it's another approach that a lot of companies are now stepping into. In fact, recently the US government is also pushing very hard and giving funding for continuous manufacturing. So, but then of course the regulators are not yet caught up on this. They have not yet confirmed whether they will approve these products, which is manufactured through continuous manufacturing. How do you do the CMC characterization activities? But definitely this is here to stay. And in the long run, I think, companies are already tying up with various companies that have experience in continuous manufacturing or developing their own in-house method and methodologies. The next aspect that really brings down the cost of goods is the large scale of manufacturing with multiple products in the same host. Again, a platform technology is a must. You can't have a 15,000 liter capacity and just have one molecule and expect it to fill the entire capacity over a long period of time. Having a continuous set of molecules that are going into the same facility with the same host, with the same experience, makes it so much more easier to manage your idle costs, your raw materials, your procurement, your packaging material, consumables, because of this entire platform procedure that we have adopted. And of course, another key aspect, gone are the days where you would get, 0.5 grams per liter or 10, to 1 gram per liter. Today, we are looking at higher yielding clones. But again, how biosimilar are these high yielding clones? And how much time has it taken for you to develop this? Again, this is not something that you can do for one molecule and then not do anything much about it. You have to have, again, I can't emphasize the platform approach, and having these clones being or these hosts and vectors being used for multiple products to enable that you get the highest yielding clones for each of these molecules. And then of course, another key aspect, as you have a platform approach, you will also have the choice between a CMO and in-house. Whatever said and done, going to a CMO is always going to be an expensive affair as compared to managing it in-house. But again, it comes with the cost of investment for this in-house capacity, and doing it for one molecule or two molecules is never going to make sense. Finally, another aspect that I would like to touch upon is on the clinical aspect. Now, a lot of countries, especially MHRA, has already come up with a guideline which they are thinking of approving a product based on a phase 1 and extensive CMC characterization. But of course, with the disclaimer that this is on a case-to-case basis. Now, again, what is this approach, in the long run going to be adopted by multiple countries, or is this something which is specific to MHRA? We know that EU could be going for a case-to-case basis also this way, versus also Canada. So there are talks about this, but when is this going to be a reality is also a question. In terms of another aspect on the clinical cost spends is, a lot of companies are looking at doing trials in Europe or in US or, some expensive countries like Japan. But also some of the approaches are these multi-centric, multi-country trials. Are there ways to mitigate this? Are there biosimilars that do not have an ethnic difference? Can you do a trial in a single country and then go to the authorities, explain the logic and bring down your cost of development? That's a question that we can ask on a individual company level as well. And this will really help you in optimizing the overall CT spends. Again, here, the Rmp sourcing strategy. Which countries do you think would make sense to source these Rmps for your global trials? Which countries are you looking at? What are the quantities that you're looking at? How long is your trial? What is the aspect of the shelf life of the trial? All these aspects cover a lot of thinking, a lot of thought process that goes into ways to mitigate the overall spends on the trial, on your product development, as well as the overall, all the ways to bring down your cost of development as well. And, again, COGS is going to play a major role in the long run. Your profitability is going to depend entirely on this. And as a group, as a as we see the regulators and the governments trying to emphasize the use of biosimilars more and more, we need to also ensure that we strike a very good balance between the cost of development, the COGS, as well as the overall requirements to enter the market. And then finally, the price in the market. How do you sustain a good price in the market, but still pass on the benefit to the patients and the regulatory authority and the governments? That is a question that we as a community need to ask. Either we bring down the overall development requirements, or we try and maintain the price at a level that will ensure that we can meet the cost of development, or otherwise the only option left is to develop strategies that you can bring down your cost of development as well as your cost of goods. So these are just some of the aspects that I wanted to cover today. And in terms of the quick pipeline at Lupin as well, I just wanted to also share with you that the main aspect of this slide is to show that we have a platform technology. It's very well spread between the microbial manufacturing and mammalian manufacturing, along with all the fill finish requirements. So it's important that you have a mixed approach like this, with our products already launched in Europe and Japan, with products getting into the US market soon. So we have a very focused approach. And again, to add on to what Anil said, being in a pure play biosimilar business is what is going to benefit in the long run. Thank you
very much.
Slides that I wanted to cover today, and keeping in mind the time, I just wanted to thank the organizers for giving this chance.
Thank you very much, Gopal. We have got a little bit of time for question and answers. Anil, are you still with us? Great. Yes, you are. Great. Thank you very much. So we've got some questions. I have one question that's come online. I'm going to read that and then take some questions from the audience here. I got one question here. Yeah. A key part of success of biosimilars is also the perception and acceptance of the regulators and health agencies, bodies versus originators. What kind of efforts are you making to counter some of this perception play?
Sure. I mean, from our side, we have a governance team, government affairs team in the US, which is working with AAM and with all other biosimilar institutions for policy infusion. And also we do work in our go-to-market model with the local champions. Our partners are local companies which are very well connected with their regulatory bodies. They do also a lot of lobbying and policy change. And maybe even more importantly, we ourselves in direct connection with FDA. I would say every month we have a conversation with them for our portfolio or for overall strategy of our biosimilars, which are basically the key efforts for how we try to influence this.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the audience here? You need the microphone.
Great talk, Gopal and Anil. This is Lupin. I've enjoyed the D's from Anil being the differentiators and the C's from Gopal. And I want to speak about one differentiator, the interchangeability, which scientifically, really is nonsense, because immunology based, you would not expect any difference between an originator and a biosimilar with the exact same sequence. But that's beside the point. Now, Anil, you're suggesting to do as a differentiator these interchangeability studies, which add on enormous cost, and you tell me this will make the entry in the market easier. Then Gopal comes and says it's all about cost, and if you bring down the cost, then my entrance into the market would be easier. can you please help me, guys? What's happening?
Louis, great to see you. First of all, again, even though virtual has been a while. Thanks for challenging in your Dutch way, as always. So I get this question a lot, to be honest, because Alvotech was a disruptor with the interchangeability strategy. And I know still people are pissed off with us as we do that. I see the industry perspective and I see all the cons that you guys see. And to be honest, I agree partially, at least scientifically, fully agree with that. But we have to be pragmatic. We have to be pragmatic. You can't fight with FDA 10 years for a battle that you don't know if you will win or lose. You have to be pragmatic. And this is where the business acumen comes to the picture, right? This is where entrepreneurship, agility, decision-making, taking risk comes to the picture. This is a commitment. I don't say that we would do this always again and again. As you say, it's a $50 million, takes 3 years. It's a huge commitment, but we are very proud. We have taken this commitment, which is going to position us incredibly well in the US biosimilar market with our adalimumab launch, because literally we have the best product profile now in the market with this approach. And in fact, what happened, Louis, which is very interesting actually, Amgen, I think undoubtedly everybody could agree, they are the leader of the biosimilars as of today with their approach, capabilities, and so on. What they did, they had been the first company basically launching adalimumab in the US in February, January 23. Did you see what they did? They just started their interchangeability study on high concentration. After 3-4 years, sitting and waiting there on the corner with their low concentration product. Why they do that? Are they stupid to spend another $50 million? Of course not. But they are also becoming pragmatic. And instead of fighting, they are collaborating with FDA and get this done and turn to a business advantage. And I agree, and I hope that in the future this is not needed. But as of still today, it's a designation. And FDA promotes this designation with the insulin launch. You can see that insulin is booming, which is great for patients, because as much as uptake we promote as an industry, if it is interchangeability, if it is of additional study whatsoever, we are committed to spend this money as long as it's going to create more access to the patients which are not getting these products. I mean, look at infliximab, Louis. 4 years, 30% penetration. Ridiculous. If infliximab interchangeable biosimilar was available since 2017, but unfortunately there was not a designation in the US, today we could save over billions from infliximab biosimilar launch and shift this money, making schools or hospitals in the US. That's very important. That's our perspective. And of course, reasonable minds can disagree.
I'm afraid, gentlemen, I'm going to have
and just to add to that, I think, just to give perspective, while this is interchangeability is still a big conversation in the US, what is happening in Europe? And in Europe, they're just switching in countries without asking for any data. In fact, in certain countries in the Nordics, you won't believe that tenders are actually being, every year for a particular molecule, there are different players winning the tenders, for the same molecule. Like, for example, once if they give it to Sandoz, next day if the price is lesser, they're giving it to Samsung. So again, it as Anil clearly pointed out, it's not. It is a combination of both. It's a combination of a strategy depending on the market, but in the long run, COGS is going to play a big factor. And if you start working on those right now, it's only going to benefit you as a company in the long run with your profitability. So that is what I'm trying to drive the point at. You might have differentiated strategies that will help you with more penetration into the market, but always keep the COGS factor in mind, because that's coming eventually.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm going to have to move to another question because we're allowing another 3 minutes extra, and I'm going to get into big trouble. One more question from Frank Wagnell. how can you build a sustainable business in a market with strong price erosions?
Gopal,
You got 3 minutes, guys, and then I'm going to stop after that.
great. My answer is that you have to be global.
Yes, you have to be global, multi-player, multi-market player, and have a strong presence in the market on the ground. The best way to do it, either go to the market directly or find a single partner who has multiple therapeutic area access in those markets, or play in tender markets that are large, that will enable you to cover your COGS or your costs for other higher, from higher paying markets versus lower paying markets. These are some of the strategies that you could implement to survive in these lower paying markets. I mean, some markets like Turkey, today the prices are so low that, even companies that have higher prices are thinking of entering those markets. They're thinking twice. But then they have a very clear strategy. It comes with reference pricing. If you and sell a product in your home country at a particular price, why can't you give it at the same price to the people in another country? So that's their approach. But yes, I think a global approach, multi-product approach will definitely enable you to survive in these markets.
One more question on the market, and I must ask that question because this is my boss's question. So he asked me to ask you. How do you maximize value in countries that have both a tender system and a private markets?
Right, so Europe is a prime example of that. So especially in the retail markets, key is to have really sales force because the healthcare professional is still making the decision. And if you don't have that, literally you can't drive your product. So this is the real value maximization, how you can get more market share and keep your prices still high because you bring value to the healthcare professionals. In the tender setting, in my opinion, we have to really look into our, at least as a manufacturer, look into our idle capacities and our overhead allocation. And we need to decide if we need these volumes or not. And I guess for every manufacturer, for every season, this will be a different answer. So we remain opportunistic in that sense for the tender markets.
Thank you very much. I think I will end this session. Gopal, do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, that's the only way to do it because, as you really pointed out, Europe is a classic example of both these kind of markets. And you have to weigh in on your opportunity and which market is providing you more profit. You go over there in terms of the private market, but if you have idle costs, idle capacity, and overhead costs that you can eliminate and then participate in these tenders so that your plant is full, then you go into those tender markets, the case-to-case basis. And across the world, this is going to be a situation going forward.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your presentations. A real pleasure. And given your first session and technically we struggled a bit, we haven't done too badly, only 3 minutes over. So thank you very much. And we'll move on to the second session.